Richard Feynman's mind, it just worked differently. We throw around the word genius for him, but what if that wasn't something he was born with? What if it was a set of very specific, very trainable habits of thinking? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
So let's just ask the question straight up. What makes a genius? I mean, is it really just some genetic lottery ticket, something you're born with and that's it? Or is it something you can actually build? Okay, check this out. 125. What's that? Well, that was supposedly Richard Feynman's high school IQ. Now, don't get me wrong, that's impressive, but it's hardly the off-the-charts number you'd expect from a Nobel Prize winner, right? This one little data point kind of suggests that the real source of his brilliance, it was something else entirely, something other than just raw intelligence.
And that right there, that's the whole genius myth in a nutshell. Feynman's story is the perfect example. His incredible breakthroughs weren't just the result of a high IQ score. Nope. They were the result of a disciplined, repeatable process of thinking.
So let's dive into the first couple of habits. These are all about building a truly rock-solid foundation of understanding, not just, collecting a bunch of facts or getting good at recognizing patterns.
All right, habit number 1 is called metacognitive monitoring. Sounds a bit academic, I know, but all it really means is having that crucial ability to spot the difference between actually understanding something and just feeling like you do. And this was a skill his dad taught him when he was just a kid.
There's this great story about when Feynman was young. He learned the name of a bird, and his father would immediately point out, "Son, knowing the name tells you almost nothing. What really mattered was understanding the bird, how it lived, what it ate, why it flew a certain way." He was basically trained from the start to dig for real meaning, not just collect a bunch of fancy labels. So why do we all fall for this trap, this illusion of understanding? Well, it's a little cognitive glitch called processing fluency. Basically, when information feels familiar, our brain gets lazy and mistakes that feeling of ease for actual mastery. But Feynman, he trained himself to see that easy, confident feeling not as a green light to stop, but as a big red flag, a signal that it was time to dig even deeper. And that actually leads us perfectly into the second habit, first principles reasoning. See, instead of just memorizing a bunch of formulas, Feynman would tear problems all the way down to their most fundamental truths. He'd always be asking, okay, what has to be true about the actual physical world for any of this math to even work?
For him, you see, math wasn't just some abstract tool you used to get an answer. It was the language describing reality itself. He absolutely refused to separate the equations on the page from the real physical world they were supposed to represent. And that simple refusal, well, it gave him this incredible advantage.
Okay, so building a deep understanding is one thing. But how do you make sure that understanding is actually, correct? Well, the next two habits are all about that, about rigorously testing your ideas against cold, hard reality.
So, habit number 3 is a serious commitment to evidence-based reasoning. This was one of Feynman's core traits. He had this deep-seated refusal to just bow to authority, especially when you could go out and check reality for yourself. He couldn't care less who came up with an idea. What mattered was whether it held up when you tested it against the real world. Think about it. Most of us, our natural instinct is to look for stuff that confirms what we already believe. It just feels good. But Feynman, he did the exact opposite. He was constantly asking himself, how could this be wrong? He was actively, deliberately trying to break his own best ideas.
The perfect example of this is the Challenger disaster investigation. While all these committees were debating abstract theories and managerial failures, Feynman just went straight to the physical reality of the problem. That famous demonstration he did with just an O-ring and a glass of ice water, it was so incredibly powerful because it just cut right through all the layers of bureaucracy and expert opinions and made a simple physical truth completely undeniable to everyone in the room.
And this brings us right to the fourth habit, creative problem representation. When Feynman got stuck on something, he didn't just bang his head against the wall and try harder. He changed the problem. He completely changed how it was represented.
This is exactly where the famous Feynman diagrams came from. He was completely stuck on the math, so he just started drawing these little pictures. And you can use this exact same principle. If you're stuck writing something, try drawing it. If you're wrestling with numbers, try explaining it out loud to someone. Just changing the format can suddenly reveal a solution that was hidden in plain sight.
All right, this final set of habits, it centers on what might be the biggest challenge of all, intellectual honesty.
It's really about mastering the incredibly difficult art of not fooling yourself.
Habit number 5 is bias monitoring. See, Feynman understood this really dangerous truth. Your own intelligence can actually be a liability. It can become a tool you use to build clever arguments for what you want to be true, instead of a tool for discovering what is true.
He had a great name for this: cargo cult science. The story goes that after World War II, some islanders in the South Pacific built these imitation runways and bamboo control towers. They were trying to attract the cargo planes they'd seen during the war. They had all the outward forms of an airport, but none of the actual substance. And Feynman's point was that a lot of science and a lot of thinking in general is just like that. It has all the rituals, the experiments, the jargon, but it's missing that core principle of relentless intellectual honesty.
And this brings us to his most famous warning, really the bedrock of his whole philosophy. He said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Think about that. When an idea felt really good, really satisfying, that's when he learned to get more skeptical, not less. He knew the person you have to watch out for the most is yourself.
And that leads directly to habit 6, actively open-minded thinking. Now, Feynman held his beliefs very strongly, but, and this is key, he never tied them to his identity. His beliefs were just models of reality. And if new evidence came along that showed the model was wrong, he changed his mind. And he didn't do it with embarrassment, he saw it as progress.
Okay, the 7th and final habit really brings everything we've talked about together. It's learning through active reconstruction. This is the engine behind what we now call the Feynman technique. He didn't just passively consume information, he would actively rebuild it from the ground up in his own words. And here's a super practical way you can use this. Study something important. Then, wait a day. And after that, try to recreate the entire argument from memory, with no notes. The spots where you get stuck, where the gaps appear in your knowledge, those aren't failures. That's the magic. They are your personal, super precise instructions telling you exactly what you need to focus on next.
So, when you put it all together, the picture becomes crystal clear. Feynman's genius wasn't some magical gift. It was a process. It was a set of powerful thinking habits that he trained, day in and day out. And the most important thing to take away from all this is that this process isn't just for Nobel Prize-winning physicists. It is available to literally anyone who's willing to put in the work.
Look at these 7 habits as your new toolkit for thinking more clearly. The only question left for you is, what belief are you going to challenge first?